AITA for staying calm after overhearing my wife plan to set me up financially. I'm Samuel, 45, and by then Lauren and I had been married for 12 years. I was the husband who remembered which coffee mug she reached for on rainy mornings, kept extra batteries in the junk drawer, and scraped the burned edges off dinner instead of complaining when we were both tired. For a long time, I thought marriage was mostly quiet effort, patience, and choosing not to turn every insult into a war. From the outside, ours looked stable. We had anniversary dinners, shared bills, holiday photos, and the same familiar arguments about whose turn it was to buy dish soap. We knew how the other person took their coffee. We could move around the kitchen without bumping into each other. We had routines that made people assume we were fine. What people didn't see was how much of our marriage belonged to Lauren's family. Lauren called her mother, Teresa, before talking to me about almost anything important. If we disagreed about replacing an appliance, Teresa knew before I had finished loading the dishwasher. If Lauren was upset with me, Russell, her older brother, somehow had an opinion by the next family dinner. Even Walter, her father, who rarely said much, had a way of delivering one sentence that stayed in the room for years. Early in our marriage, I heard him tell Teresa that Lauren had chosen someone safe, not impressive. He didn't know I was close enough to hear. Teresa answered, "Safe matters." Neither of them sounded pleased. I told myself it didn't matter. Walter wasn't my husband. Teresa wasn't my wife. Lauren had chosen me, and that was supposed to be enough. Russell was less subtle. He liked jokes that gave him somewhere to hide if anyone objected. At a cookout a few years into our marriage, he watched me carry 2 folding tables across the yard and said, "Look at Samuel, still doing the heavy lifting so nobody notices he's the least interesting man here." A couple of people laughed because Russell had already laughed. I set the tables down and said, "Good thing the tables don't need entertainment." That got a better laugh, and Russell's smile tightened. Later, Lauren told me I had embarrassed him. "He insulted me in front of everyone," I said. He was kidding. So was I. "You always take things too personally when it comes to my family." That became a familiar sentence. I was too sensitive. I was reading into things. I didn't understand their humor. Teresa was only trying to help. Russell was protective. Walter was old-fashioned. Every explanation required me to absorb the insult so everyone else could stay comfortable. I called that maturity. Hannah, my younger sister, eventually called it something else, but that came later. The dinner where everything changed was at our house. Lauren had invited her parents, Russell, 2 aunts, a cousin named Marcy, and Marcy's husband. She said it had been too long since everyone sat down together. The dining table didn't quite fit that many people, so I added a folding table at one end and covered the gap with a long runner. The serving bowls didn't match. One was white, one was blue, and one had a faded ring of painted lemons around the edge. The roast rested under foil on the counter while I finished potatoes and green beans. The kitchen smelled like garlic, butter, and the faint, scorched sweetness of onions that had caught at the bottom of the pan. Lauren had been unusually bright all afternoon. Not happy exactly. Polished. She wore the earrings Teresa had given her and changed her blouse twice. She kept checking her phone, then placing it face down beside the cutting board. When I asked if she was expecting someone else, she said, "I just want a night to go smoothly." Teresa arrived early and hugged Lauren for a long time. After that, she kept touching Lauren's arm whenever they passed each other, as if comforting her before anything had happened. Russell showed up 10 minutes late with a bottle of wine and no apology. He stood in the dining room, looked at the folding table, and said, "This is cozy." "It seats everyone," I said. "It does technically qualify as seating." Lauren gave him a warning look, but she was smiling. Then he handed me the wine instead of setting it down himself. "Open that, would you?" I took the bottle. "Sure. Look at you, Samuel. Still doing the heavy lifting." The line was mild compared with some of his others, but something about Lauren's expression bothered me. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked watchful. Dinner started normally. Walter asked about a repair I had recently handled. Teresa complimented the roast in the careful tone she used when she wanted credit for being gracious. Russell talked over Marcy's husband twice. Lauren laughed a little too quickly at everything. Halfway through the meal, the ice bucket was nearly empty. I picked it up and went toward the kitchen. The extra bag of ice was in the freezer near the laundry room, and I also needed 2 folding chairs from the hallway closet, because one of the chairs at the table had started wobbling. As I reached the laundry room door, I heard Russell's voice. It was lower than usual. You need to move before things get harder to untangle. I stopped. The door was cracked open. Through the gap, I could see part of Teresa's sleeve and the edge of Lauren's shoulder. I couldn't see Russell, but his voice was clear. Teresa said, "The timing matters. If Samuel speaks first, people will think you're being greedy." Lauren answered, "I know." There was no fear in her voice. No hesitation. She sounded like someone reviewing a list. Russell said, "What did the lawyer say?" "That I need a clean record of how he handles money." I saved the texts. "Which ones?" "The ones where he says I can't move funds without asking him." Teresa made a soft sound. "Don't say without asking. Say he requires permission." Lauren said, "That's what I mean." My fingers tightened around the ice bucket. Russell continued, "And the family needs to hear about it before he starts explaining everything away." Lauren said, "By next week, everyone will think he trapped me." Then Russell said the sentence that turned 12 years of my life into something I no longer recognized. "Make him lose his temper first. Then nobody questions the money." The freezer hummed beside me. Water from the half-melted ice slid down the outside of the bucket and over my knuckles. Teresa said, "Don't push too hard. It has to look natural." Lauren answered, "I know how he reacts." That was the moment the marriage ended for me. Not because Lauren wanted a divorce. Marriages end. People change. Painful as that would have been, I could have faced it. What ended us was hearing my wife discuss my reactions as material. Hearing her mother adjust the wording of a false accusation. Hearing her brother mention money like it was already theirs to divide and hide. They weren't talking about a man Lauren had loved for 12 years. They were talking about an obstacle. I stepped backward before anyone saw me. I put the ice bucket on the counter, opened the freezer, and poured in fresh ice. My hands were steady only because I concentrated on each movement. Open bag. Pour ice. Close freezer. Breathe in. Breathe out. When I returned to the dining room, Lauren looked up and smiled. There was a softness in her face that would have fooled me an hour earlier. She brushed her fingers over my sleeve. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. I set the bucket down, filled Walter's glass, then Teresa's. "Anyone need more potatoes?" For the rest of dinner, I watched. Russell barely looked at me unless he was making a joke. Teresa kept checking Lauren's face. Walter said little. Lauren was affectionate in small, visible ways. She touched my wrist when she asked me to pass the bread. She thanked me for cooking. She told Marcy that I always remembered how Teresa liked her vegetables. It was a performance layered over another performance. I smiled, cleared plates, wrapped leftovers, and walked everyone to the door. Russell clapped me on the shoulder before leaving. "Good dinner. Glad you enjoyed it." His hand stayed there a second too long, heavy and familiar, like he owned space on my body as easily as he owned space in my marriage. After they left, Lauren stood at the sink rinsing wine glasses. "My mom thought tonight went really well," she said. "That's good. You seemed quiet." "Long day." She turned off the water and looked at me. "You're not upset about something, are you?" There it was. Small and careful. A hook dropped into dark water. I dried a plate. "No." Her eyes stayed on me for another second. Then she smiled. "Okay." I didn't sleep much that night. Lauren slept on her side, facing away from me, breathing evenly. I lay beside her and replayed the conversation until every word felt engraved somewhere behind my eyes. Part of me wanted to wake her and demand an explanation. I imagined turning on the lamp and asking how long she had been planning this. I imagined Russell's name coming out of my mouth louder than I intended. I imagined Lauren crying, pulling away, telling everyone I had frightened her. Then I heard his voice again. "Make him lose his temper first." So I stayed still. The next morning, I made coffee. Lauren used the blue mug she always used when it rained. I had placed it beside the machine before she came downstairs, out of habit. She picked it up, looked at it, and said, "You know me too well." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "Apparently." For the next several days, I didn't confront her. I paid attention. Once I stopped explaining away the little things, they began arranging themselves into a pattern. Lauren changed the password on a side account we both used for household purchases. When I asked why, she said there had been a security alert. "Can you send me the new login?" I asked. I'll do it later. She didn't. Russell started dropping by more often. Sometimes he came when I was home, but usually Lauren texted that he had stopped in while I was out. Twice I entered the kitchen, and their conversation stopped so abruptly that the silence felt physical. Teresa sent messages late at night. Lauren would glance down, type quickly, then turn the phone over. More importantly, Lauren started planting sentences in front of other people. At Sunday lunch with her parents, Teresa asked whether Lauren would join her for a weekend event. Lauren sighed and said, "I'll have to see how Samuel feels about it." I looked at her. "Why would you have to see how I feel?" She gave a small laugh. "You know what I mean." "I don't." Russell leaned back in his chair. "She means you get weird when she spends too much time with us." "I've never told her she couldn't spend time with you." Lauren's face changed. "Not much." Her mouth tightened, and her voice went softer. "I didn't say you told me I couldn't. You said you had to see how I felt." Teresa touched Lauren's wrist. "Nobody is accusing anyone, Samuel." "I'm clarifying what she said." Lauren looked down at her plate. "This is exactly why I avoid bringing things up." The table went quiet. Every instinct I had developed over 12 years told me to smooth it over. Make a joke. Change the subject. Protect everyone from discomfort. Instead, I said, "You can go. I have no objection." Then I picked up my fork. Lauren looked disappointed. That reaction told me she hadn't wanted permission. She had wanted resistance. The next attempt came over money. We had a joint checking account for household expenses and a joint credit card for shared purchases. We also each had personal accounts. That arrangement had never been secretive. Our pay went where we had agreed. Recurring bills were covered, and larger joint expenses were supposed to be discussed first. One evening, Lauren stood at the kitchen counter with her arms folded and said, "Russell needs temporary help." "How much? Why does the amount matter before you know what happened?" "Because you're asking to use joint money." Her eyes narrowed. "You always make money feel like permission." "No, I make joint money feel joint. He's family." "That doesn't answer how much." She walked away without telling me. 2 days later, I noticed a transfer from the joint checking account. It was large enough that neither of us could reasonably call it routine, but not so large that it looked like someone emptying the account. The memo said family emergency. I asked Lauren about it after dinner. She kept wiping the same section of the counter. "My mom had an urgent bill." "What kind of bill?" "Medical." "Is she okay?" Lauren paused. It wasn't for her exactly. It was connected to something she was helping with. "So it wasn't her medical bill. Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm asking where our money went." She put the cloth down. "Russell had a situation, and Mom was helping him." "What situation?" "A debt issue." "You told me it was an urgent bill for your mother." "Because it involved her." "That's not the same explanation." Lauren's face shifted into hurt. "This is why I didn't want to tell you. You judge my family." I kept my voice even. "I'm not judging anyone. I'm asking what the money was used for." She walked out of the kitchen. The next day, I printed the bank statement. I had lawful access to the account, and I wanted a physical copy in case anything changed online. The transfer had gone through a payment service. A few hours later, while searching our shared household email for an unrelated receipt, I found a reimbursement notice. It referenced the same amount and included Russell's name. I printed that too. That night, I started a timeline. At first, it was just a page on a legal pad. Dinner conversation. Lauren says text saved. Russell says provoke anger. Transfer marked family emergency. Explanation changes. Teresa bill, medical issue, Russell debt. I wrote dates beside each item. I didn't add theories. I didn't call Lauren a liar on the page. I wrote only what had happened and what I could prove. A few evenings later, Lauren's phone lit up on the kitchen counter while I was putting away clean dishes. I didn't touch it. The phone was face up beside a dish towel, and the preview appeared in large enough text to read from where I stood. "Russell, make sure he loses his temper first. It'll help." For a second, I heard nothing except the quiet click of the refrigerator cycling on. The dinner conversation hadn't been one ugly family discussion that went too far. It was active, current. They were still working on it. I took my own phone from my pocket and photographed the screen exactly as it sat on the counter. The picture showed the preview, the time, and enough of the kitchen to make clear where it was. I didn't open Lauren's phone. I didn't swipe the notification. I stepped away. When Lauren came back into the room, She looked at her screen, then at me. Did you touch my phone? No. She picked it up and carried it with her. Later that night, she sat across from me at the table and said we should consider selling one of our shared assets and moving the money into something safer. What do you mean by safer? I asked. More flexible. For whom? She gave me a tired smile. For us. What account would it go into? I don't know yet. Then we shouldn't sell anything yet. Her voice sharpened. You always shut things down. I'm asking for details. You want control. I want anything involving shared property and shared money in writing. She stared at me. We can discuss it when we're both calm, I continued, and when the proposal is clear. She pushed her chair back. You're proving my point. What point? That I can't make a decision without your approval. You can make any decision you want about your personal property and personal money. Shared property requires both of us. That applies to me too. Her eyes flashed. Not fear, not sadness, frustration. She had thrown the bait, and I had refused to bite. The next morning, I called Dominic. Dominic and I had known each other long enough that he could tell when I was minimizing something. I gave him the basic facts in the flattest voice I could manage. I expected him to ask whether I had misunderstood. He didn't. He said, Do you have proof? I have the account records. I have a photo of a message preview. I heard the first conversation, but I don't have a recording. Good. Good. Good that you didn't record something without knowing the law. Good that you didn't open her phone. Good that you didn't confront her while her brother was waiting for you to lose control. I leaned against my car in the parking lot where we had agreed to meet. It was late afternoon, and the sun reflected off the windshield hard enough to make me squint. I feel like I'm acting insane, I said. I'm making timelines about my own wife. You're responding to an organized attempt to damage you. I still have to go home and eat dinner with her. Yes. That's your advice? My advice is that you don't give them the scene they're trying to sell. You need paper, not anger. He let that sit for a moment. Talk to an attorney, he added. Don't move money around because you're scared. Don't threaten her. Don't tell Russell what you know. Ask what you can legally do to protect yourself and keep your side clean. I'm not trying to punish her. I know. That's why you need advice before anger turns into action. The attorney I consulted didn't promise me victory. That helped me trust her. She listened, reviewed the statements I brought, and asked precise questions about account ownership, recurring obligations, personal funds, and access. She told me not to hide assets, drain joint accounts, or interfere with Lauren's lawful access. She also told me I was not required to keep depositing personal income into arrangements that exposed me unnecessarily, as long as I continued meeting my obligations and followed legal advice. Protecting yourself is not the same as retaliating, she said. Keep that line clean. I did. I redirected future personal deposits where appropriate. I kept the joint household account funded for agreed expenses. I continued paying the mortgage, utilities, insurance, and the joint credit card balance on time. I canceled a few non-essential plans we hadn't yet paid for, including a weekend reservation Lauren had made without discussing it. I changed passwords on my personal accounts and enabled additional security. I didn't lock Lauren out of anything she legally shared. Most importantly, I moved communication about significant financial decisions into writing. When Lauren asked about selling the shared asset again, I emailed her a calm summary. I wrote that I was open to reviewing any proposal if she provided the estimated value, intended account, purpose, and distribution plan. I copied no one. I accused her of nothing. She replied, It's sad that I need to submit paperwork to my husband to have a conversation. I answered, A written proposal will help us avoid misunderstanding. That exchange went into the timeline. As I gathered records, the full shape of the setup became clearer. I had access to old text threads between Lauren and me because they were my own messages. I searched for the lines she had referenced during the laundry room conversation. One was from nearly a year earlier. Lauren had texted, I transferred money to help mom. Don't make this a thing. I had replied, We agreed to discuss transfers over $500. Please don't commit joint funds without telling me. We need to talk when you get home. On its own, the sentence, Please don't commit joint funds without telling me, sounded stern. But the message before it showed that Lauren had already moved the money. The earlier messages showed that we had both agreed to the limit. A later message showed that I had accepted the expense once she explained it. Another cropped line was, "We need to talk before you make plans like that." The full conversation was about Lauren offering our home to visiting relatives for nearly 2 weeks without asking me. My next line had been, "I would give you the same respect before inviting my family." She had saved the first sentence and cut off the rest. I found several examples like that because Lauren had forwarded screenshots to our shared household email months earlier when printing photos for some purpose. The images were cropped. The original conversations remained on my phone. She had been building her version of me for longer than I realized. The financial records were worse. Several charges labeled household errands didn't match any household purchase. 2 transfers marked as help for Teresa aligned with payment confirmations involving Russell. A credit card charge Lauren had described as an emergency repair matched a debt service. None of the amounts alone would have destroyed us, but together they formed a serious pattern. Then I found an old voicemail from Teresa. She had left it for Lauren on our shared home line months earlier, apparently forgetting that messages could be accessed by either of us. Her voice was gentle. "Sweetheart, I know this is difficult. You need to get ahead of the story before he makes you look dishonest. People understand a woman protecting herself, but they become suspicious when money is already missing. Stay calm. Don't let him make this about details." The message ended with, "Call me when you're alone." I replayed it once. Then I saved a lawful copy and sent it to my attorney. That voicemail changed something in me. Until then, part of me had still been trying to separate Lauren from her family's influence. I had thought perhaps Russell was pushing, Teresa was manipulating, and Lauren was weak enough to follow. But Lauren had selected the texts. Lauren had moved the money. Lauren had lied about where it went. Lauren had sat across from me and tried to provoke the exact reaction Russell wanted. She wasn't being carried into the lie. She was walking. I told Hannah after that. It was late, and I sat at the kitchen table with only the light above the stove turned on. Lauren had gone out, saying she needed space. I could hear Hannah moving around her own kitchen through the phone. "I feel guilty," I said. "For what?" "For not confronting her. For collecting things. It feels dishonest." Hannah was quiet for a moment. "Did you invent any of it?" "No." "Did you steal access to anything?" "No." "Did you move money to punish her?" "No." "Then you're not being dishonest. You're protecting yourself from people who are planning to lie about you. I should have dealt with this family years ago." "Yes." Her answer was so immediate that I almost smiled. "You could pretend that wasn't blunt," I said. "I love you too much to pretend." I rubbed my forehead. I kept thinking if I stayed calm, they'd eventually see I wasn't the person they made me out to be. "Samuel, you've been calling it maturity because that sounds better than admitting they trained you to absorb disrespect." The sentence landed harder than anything Russell had said. Hannah continued, "You keep calling it peace, but it only looks peaceful because you're the one swallowing everything." I looked around the kitchen. The blue mug sat in the drying rack. The junk drawer was slightly open. One of the extra batteries had rolled toward the front. All those small acts of care had been real. That was the part one struggled with. I had loved Lauren in ordinary ways for 12 years. The fact that she was betraying me didn't make those years imaginary. But it did mean I couldn't keep offering care as proof that I deserved basic honesty. "I don't want revenge," I said. "Then don't take revenge. Tell the truth, set boundaries, and leave." The next week, Lauren sent me a calendar invitation. The title was Clearing the Air. The location was her parents' house. The guest list included Russell, Teresa, Walter, Marcy and her husband, 2 aunts, and a few other relatives. I looked at the screen for a long time. Then Lauren walked into the room. "I think we need to have a family conversation," she said. "About what?" "About us." "Why does your family need to be there?" Her eyes filled with moisture so quickly that I wondered if she had practiced. "Because I need support." "Support for what?" "For finally being honest about what I've been living with." There was the phrase. Not our marriage. What she had been living with. She sat across from me and folded her hands. "I don't want this to be ugly." "Neither do I. I want everyone to understand." "Then everyone should understand." She studied my face. "You'll come?" "Yes." Her shoulders relaxed. She thought I was walking onto her stage unprepared. In the days before the gathering, I organized everything into a plain document envelope. No dramatic binder. No color-coded tabs. Just printed bank statements, transaction confirmations, full-text threads, the photograph of the visible notification, a transcript of Teresa's voicemail, and a short timeline. I also printed an email from my attorney confirming that I had asked how to protect my finances while continuing shared obligations. I didn't plan to show legal advice or privileged details. I wanted a record that I had acted responsibly before anyone accused me of financial punishment. I sent copies of the relevant evidence to my attorney and stored a second set securely. I wasn't building a bomb. I was building a record. The evening of the gathering, Lauren dressed carefully. She wore a soft gray sweater and very little makeup. She looked tired in a way that seemed intentional. Before we left, she stood near the front door and said, "I hope you can listen tonight without becoming defensive." "I'll listen." She waited, maybe expecting more. I picked up the document envelope. "What's that?" "Paperwork." Her gaze dropped to it, then returned to my face. "What kind of paperwork?" "Things we may need." A pulse moved in her jaw. During the drive, she said almost nothing. Teresa opened the door before we knocked. She hugged Lauren and touched her cheek. "Oh, sweetheart." Then she looked at me. "Samuel." "Teresa." The dining room had been arranged like a hearing disguised as a family visit. Chairs lined the walls. Water glasses were already set out. Family photos covered one wall, including several pictures of Lauren and me from happier years. Russell stood near the doorway with his arms crossed. He nodded at the envelope. "Bringing homework?" "Something like that." Walter sat at the head of the table. He looked at me, then at Lauren, and said nothing. Marcy gave me an awkward half-smile. Her husband looked at the floor. Once everyone settled, Teresa began. "We're here because Lauren has been carrying something painful for a long time, and she deserves the chance to speak without being interrupted." Russell looked directly at me when she said interrupted. I rested the envelope on my lap. Lauren took a breath. "I haven't known how to talk about this," she began. "I've spent years minimizing my own feelings because I wanted the marriage to work." Her voice was quiet, controlled, and believable. That was the worst part. She said I treated money like a tool of permission. She said I made her feel guilty for helping her family. She said she had slowly lost confidence in her own decisions because everything became a discussion, a budget, or a question. "I know Samuel will say he never told me I couldn't do things," she said. "That's technically true. But control isn't always someone saying no. Sometimes it's making the cost of saying yes so exhausting that you stop asking." A couple of relatives nodded. Lauren looked down at her hands. "I've also felt isolated. Every time I spend time with my family, there's tension afterward. I started hiding normal things because I was afraid of the reaction. My chest tightened, but I kept breathing evenly." She had taken ordinary marital disagreements, removed every detail that explained them, and arranged them into a story polished enough to survive casual scrutiny. Teresa moved beside her and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Lauren is asking to leave with dignity," she said. "Samuel, this can still be handled with grace if you let her move on without punishing her." Russell stepped forward. "Do the decent thing for once. Don't drag my sister through a fight you already lost because your pride got hurt." I said nothing. He kept going. "She has been afraid to tell you the truth. That should tell everyone in this room something." Marcy looked at me. "Samuel," she said carefully, "do you have anything to say?" I stood. The room became very quiet. I placed the document envelope on the table. "I was going to let this be private," I said. "Then you turned it into a performance." Russell scoffed. "There it is," he said, always acting superior. I looked at him. "You'll have a chance to explain your part." His expression changed. Lauren stared at the envelope. I opened it and took out the first set of papers. "I'm not going to argue about feelings," I said. "Lauren is entitled to leave the marriage. I'm not asking anyone to persuade her to stay. But she and several people in this room have made specific accusations about money, isolation, and fear. Those accusations are being used to shape how this divorce begins. So I'm going to address the facts." Teresa's hand left Lauren's shoulder. I placed a bank statement on the table. "This is our joint checking account. On this date, Lauren transferred several $1,000s and labeled it family emergency. Russell said, "That's private. You made it public when you accused me of controlling the money." I turned to the next page. Lauren first told me the transfer covered an urgent bill for Teresa. Then she said it was medical. Then she said it was a dead issue involving Russell. Lauren's voice shook. It was complicated. I agree. That's why I asked questions. I placed the payment confirmation beside the statement. This record connects the amount to Russell. Every face in the room shifted toward him. Russell straightened. Lauren helped me. Families do that. With joint funds, she moved without telling me. You would have said no. You never asked. Lauren said, because I knew how you would react. You mean I would ask what the money was for? She looked at Teresa. I continued. This was not the only transfer. I laid out 2 more records. I explained the memo lines, the dates, and the explanations I had been given. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't call Russell a thief. I simply showed that money described as household expenses and assistance for Teresa had gone to matters involving Russell. Marcy's husband leaned forward. How much altogether? He asked. I gave the total. It was serious enough to change the room, but believable enough that nobody could dismiss it as fantasy. Russell began pacing. This is ridiculous. She has a right to help her family. With her money, yes, I said. With shared money, we were supposed to agree. Lauren's aunt looked at her. Did Samuel know about any of these? Lauren wiped beneath one eye. He knew my family needed help. That is not what she asked, I said. Teresa intervened. Everyone is emotional. Money between spouses is rarely as simple as a spreadsheet. No, I said, but transfers are. Russell pointed at me. This is what he does. He buries her in details until she looks wrong. I removed the photograph of the phone notification. Then let's discuss your detail. Lauren's face went pale before I even turned it around. I placed the photo where the others could see it. The preview was clear. Make sure he loses his temper first. It'll help. Russell stopped moving. Marcy read it twice. What is that? Walter asked. Russell recovered first. He was spying on her phone. I did not open her phone, I said. The message lit up on my kitchen counter while I was standing there. I photographed what was visible. You had no right. A message lighting up on my kitchen counter is not a private diary. Lauren's breathing became uneven. You were waiting for something like that? She said. No, I was putting away dishes. You're twisting a private conversation. What does make sure he loses his temper first mean? Russell answered for her. It means you have a temper. Then show the room one example. You're doing it now. I looked around. My voice had not risen. My hands were still. No, I said. I'm speaking. Nobody came to Russell's rescue. I took out the full text threads. Lauren said tonight that I use money as permission. She has also told relatives that I send controlling messages. Some of those messages are in this packet. Lauren stood. You went through my things. These are my messages on my phone. She sat again. I read the first cropped sentence. Please don't commit joint funds without telling me. Then I read the message before it, where Lauren admitted she had already transferred money. I read the earlier agreement we had both made about discussing transfers over a certain amount. I read the message afterward, where I said we could keep the expense once she explained it. The room heard the difference. I moved to the next example. We need to talk before you make plans like that. Then I read the full exchange showing that Lauren had invited several relatives to stay in our home for nearly 2 weeks without asking me. I read my next line. I would give you the same respect before inviting my family. Lauren shook her head. This isn't fair. Which part? You're taking everything out and making it sound reasonable. I looked at her. I'm adding back the parts you cut out. Russell stepped toward the table. Enough. I turned to him. Context is only unfair when the lie depends on cutting it out. His chair was behind him, but he didn't sit. He stood over the table, jaw tight, trying to restore the shape of the room through sheer size. Teresa spoke softly. Lauren was trying to explain how she felt. Screenshots are imperfect. That doesn't invalidate her experience. No, I said. But deliberately cropping conversations to remove the reason for them does invalidate the accusation. Teresa's face hardened. You're humiliating your wife. I did not invite an audience. You knew she needed support. She needed witnesses. A low murmur moved through the room. I took out the transcript of Teresa's voicemail. Since we're discussing support, this is a voicemail Teresa left on our shared home line. Teresa froze. I read it without performing it. Get ahead of the story before he makes you look dishonest. People understand a woman protecting herself, but they become suspicious when money is already missing. Stay calm. Don't let him make this about details. Walter looked at her. You said that. Teresa's mouth opened, but nothing came out immediately. Then she recovered. I was worried. Lauren was frightened and confused. You mentioned missing money, I said. You knew there was something to hide. I knew Samuel would use finances to overpower her. You told her not to let me make it about details because the details exposed the lie. I was protecting my daughter. You weren't protecting her from me. You were protecting the story from the truth. Teresa went pale. For the first time in all the years I had known her, she had no graceful sentence ready. Russell slapped his palm against the table. This is a setup. The sound made several people jump. He pointed at the papers. You came here planning to attack them. I came here knowing I was about to be accused. You're dead weight with a bank account, Samuel. That's all you've ever been. You think printing a few papers makes you a man. His chair scraped hard against the floor as he shoved it aside. Walter spoke. Sit down, Russell. The room went silent. Walter hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. Russell looked at him. Dad, sit down. Russell sat. Walter turned to Lauren. How much money did you send him? Lauren looked at Russell, then at Teresa. Walter repeated the question. She gave the amount I had already stated. Why, he asked. Russell answered. I had a temporary problem. What problem? It's handled. With Samuel's money? With Lauren's money. Walter looked at the joint statement. That says both names. Russell's mouth tightened. One of the aunts spoke next. If Samuel controlled all the money, how did this much leave the account without him knowing? Nobody answered. Lauren began crying harder. This time it was not the measured crying she had started with. Her shoulders shook, and she pressed both hands over her face. I felt trapped, she said. I knew if I told him everything, he would judge me. I waited until she lowered her hands. You could have asked for a divorce. I was scared. You consulted a lawyer. You moved money. You collected edited messages. You planned a family meeting. You were capable of taking action. That doesn't mean I wasn't scared. No, but fear does not explain why Russell told you to provoke me. She looked down. Teresa said, Lauren made mistakes because she was desperate. So did you help her because she was desperate, or because you wanted the family to hear her story before I could defend myself? Teresa's face reddened. This is not a courtroom. No, in a courtroom, documents matter even more. Russell muttered something under his breath. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. I'm not here to win a marriage that's already dead, I said. I'm here to stop paying for the lie that killed it. Lauren looked at me as if the finality had surprised her. You don't even want to try? She asked. That question almost broke my composure, not because I wanted her back, but because it was so perfectly unfair. You planned how to make me look like I had a serious problem before telling me you wanted to leave. I didn't say you had a serious problem. You told people I controlled you, isolated you, and frightened you. That's how I felt. And you coordinated evidence to create that conclusion. She shook her head. I put the papers back into the envelope. I'm not fighting to keep you. I'm fighting to leave with the truth intact. Then I looked around the room. From this point forward, financial matters will go through attorneys and written communication. I will continue paying required shared obligations. I will not fund Russell. I will not sell shared property without a written agreement. I will not discuss accusations through relatives. Teresa said, You're punishing Lauren by making everything legal. No, I'm protecting both of us by making everything clear. Russell stood again. Walter didn't say anything this time. He only looked at him. Russell sat back down. The gathering didn't explode. There were no dramatic gasps, no one throwing a glass, no sudden applause. It collapsed slowly. That was more satisfying. Marcy asked Lauren why she had cropped the texts. Lauren said she had only been trying to show how the conversations made her feel. Marcy replied, but the missing parts change what happened. One aunt asked Teresa why she had mentioned missing money if she believed Lauren had done nothing wrong. Teresa said she had been speaking emotionally. Marcy's husband asked Russell whether he intended to repay the funds. Russell said it was a private matter. Walter said, Not anymore. The room became awkward in the plain, human way real rooms do when a family story stops working. People looked at their hands. Someone moved a water glass without drinking. One aunt quietly removed her purse from the chair and placed it on the floor as if preparing to leave. Lauren kept crying, but the crying no longer controlled the room. That was what she had wanted most, control of the first impression. She wanted everyone to hear that I was controlling before anyone learned she had moved money. She wanted my anger to arrive before my explanation. She wanted the emotional version to harden before facts could complicate it. She lost that. I left alone. Lauren stayed with her parents. When I got home, the house looked exactly as it had before. Her shoes were still by the entryway. A sweater hung over the back of a chair. The blue coffee mug sat upside down in the drying rack. I stood in the kitchen where her phone had lit up and felt the silence settle around me. It was not relief. Not yet. It was the absence of performance. The following morning, I emailed Lauren a factual summary. I stated that I would continue paying agreed household obligations, that no shared assets would be sold or transferred without written agreement, and that divorce-related financial communication should include counsel where appropriate. I didn't mention the family gathering except to say that I would not discuss the matter through relatives. She replied with 3 paragraphs about how cold I had become. I forwarded the email to my attorney and didn't argue. Teresa called twice. The first time she left no message. The second time she left a voicemail in the same soft tone she had used when helping Lauren build the accusation. Samuel, I hope we can all take a breath. Last night became much more adversarial than anyone intended. Lauren is devastated. Whatever mistakes were made, 12 years deserves compassion. I saved the voicemail. Then I sent one written response. I will communicate with Lauren directly or through counsel. I will not discuss the divorce with extended family. Teresa didn't answer. Russell sent me a text. You humiliated my mother and sister. I replied, do not contact me about the divorce. Any financial issue involving the transferred funds should be handled in writing. He wrote, you always hide behind paperwork. I didn't respond. Within a week, Walter began asking Russell direct questions about the money. I learned that through Lauren, not because Walter contacted me. Russell had apparently told his parents that the transfers were temporary loans. Teresa had known about some of them, but not all. The amount had been spread across debt payments and other expenses Russell had not disclosed. There was no dramatic arrest, no instant ruin, and no fantasy ending where everyone handed me back every dollar with an apology. There was pressure. Walter insisted Russell sign a repayment agreement. 2 relatives who had previously loaned Russell money began asking for clearer records. Teresa's reputation as the gentle, neutral mother didn't survive the voicemail. She still defended Lauren, but people stopped accepting every soft sentence as wisdom. Lauren's family also stopped treating me like an outsider who should be grateful for inclusion. Some relatives apologized. Others did not. A few simply became distant because admitting what happened would have required them to examine how easily they had believed the version that made me the problem. I accepted that. The divorce itself was not easy. Truth didn't erase grief, legal fees, or the ugliness of separating a shared life. It didn't make every financial question simple. It didn't give me automatic victory. What it did was remove the false starting point. Lauren could still say she was unhappy. She could say our marriage had become emotionally distant. She could say she felt judged by my questions. Those were matters of perspective. She could no longer credibly say she had no access to money while records showed her moving it. She could not say my financial boundaries were sudden retaliation when my attorney had documented that I kept shared obligations current. She could not present Russell as a neutral protector after his message about provoking me. Everything important went through writing. When Lauren called unexpectedly, I let it go to voicemail unless the issue was urgent. When we did speak, I followed up with an email summarizing the conversation. I stopped debating tone. I stopped trying to persuade her to see me fairly. One night, several days after the family gathering, Lauren called 3 times. The third voicemail said, please, I just want to talk as 2 people who were married. I called back. She answered immediately. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, Russell pushed too hard. I stood at the kitchen counter, looking at the place where her phone had been. Yes, I said. And my mom made it worse. Yes. I didn't know how to leave. You could have told me. You would have tried to convince me to stay. Maybe. Before I knew what you were doing. I felt trapped. I closed my eyes. Lauren, you keep saying that as if it explains planning to make me look unstable. I wasn't trying to destroy you. What did you think would happen when relatives believed I controlled you, isolated you, and frightened you? I needed support. You wanted leverage. She started crying. I was scared I would leave with nothing. You had your personal accounts, legal rights, shared property, and access to counsel. You were not leaving with nothing. You always make it sound so simple. It wasn't simple. That's why you should have told the truth. She was quiet. Then she said, I did love you. I believed her. That hurt more than calling her a liar would have. I loved you too, I said. Then how can you be this cold? I'm not cold. I'm done being useful to you. That's not fair. You had 12 years to treat me like your husband. You chose to treat me like an exit plan. Her breathing caught. I didn't do this alone. No, but you did it willingly. Russell said. I'm not married to Russell. My mom thought. I'm not married to your mother. She said nothing. I continued. Every financial issue goes through the attorneys. Every decision stays in writing. I'm not doing that because I hate you. I'm doing it because you proved that private trust was something you were willing to edit. She whispered, Is there really no way back? No. It was the first completely honest answer either of us had given about the marriage in months. After the call, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. But I also felt clear. For years, I had believed that the calmest person in the room was automatically the strongest. That was not always true. Sometimes the calmest person was simply the one absorbing the most damage while everyone else benefited from his restraint. I had confused silence with dignity. Now I understood the difference. Dignity was not pretending the insult didn't hurt. It was refusing to let the hurt decide my next move. It was paying what I was required to pay and not $1 toward Russell's problems. It was answering accusations with full context instead of louder accusations. It was letting Lauren cry without stepping back into the role of comforting her out of consequences. It was walking away from a family that had spent years mistaking patience for permission. Months later, the house felt different. Not happier every day, but honest. The junk drawer was still disorganized. I still kept extra batteries in it. I bought a new coffee mug because the blue one carried too much history, then felt ridiculous for caring, then kept the new one anyway. Henna came over one evening and found me trying to repair the same wobbling chair from that last family dinner. You know you can throw that out, she said. It only needs a new brace. She watched me tighten the screw. You really hate wasting things. I do. People too. I looked up at her. She softened. That wasn't criticism. I know. The chair held when I set it upright. Some things could be repaired because the damage was structural and visible. You found the weak point, replaced what failed, and tested the weight. A marriage built around hidden transfers, edited evidence, and rehearsed fear was different. There was no honest repair, while one person still insisted the missing pieces were unfair. I used to think being calm meant absorbing the hit and proving I was the bigger person. Now I know calm can also mean stepping aside, locking the door behind you, and refusing to fund the lie someone built around you. Lauren thought I was too harmless to fight back. She forgot harmless is not the same as helpless. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.